Okay, so today what we're going to do, we're going to go through lecture, and then if you guys can stay around, I'm going to give you the info on how to go through the Labster lab, how to find it. So you occasionally some of your simulations will be Labster, occasionally some of your simulations will be the Physio Exo labs, and then we'll talk about what you need to do. I'll let Jesse do all of the talking on that since he's the expert. So I'm learning from him as we go. Okay, so let's start with, you guys remember from last week. Wow, wait a minute, hold on. We had 3 people here last week, so we're like almost 3 times the amount. So we're making progress.
We're getting popular.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm excited.
Okay, so let's go to the whiteboard. So if I have this isotope, how many protons do I have? How many electrons do I have? And how many neutrons do I have? Okay, let's see. Any volunteers? Or do I need a voluntold?
Do you have 22 neutrons, 20 protons, and 20 electrons?
You said 22?
20 protons, 22 neutrons. And then, yeah.
Okay, that is correct. So, everybody gets that? I'm trying not to laugh here, because Whitney was in my chem class, so she should know this. If she didn't, I was gonna tell her automatically for this.
It was only appropriate to answer that question, or I feel like I'd get my butt kicked.
Okay. Anybody not get it?
I don't.
I like honesty. Okay, so real quick. So the way that we determine the number of protons is always by the atomic number. So let's go to the periodic table. Oops. And what I'll do, I'll put a periodic table in your resources. That you guys can use on an exam. So this is called P table. This is where this is the periodic table that I use, my preference. Okay, so your atomic number is the number up top. So we're talking about calcium. So that's your atomic number. Your atomic number tells you the number of protons. Now, if it's an element and it's not an ionic, doesn't have a plus or minus charge associated with it, then the number of protons have to equal the number of neutrons. So we are talking about Ca42. Right? So the number of protons was 20. The number of electrons, so protons are positively charged. Electrons are negatively charged. So if this guy has no charge associated with it, how many electrons must I have? Victoria?
I don't know. I'm so confused.
Okay, so if I have 20 plus charges, right? How many negative charges must I have for it to equal 0?
20?
That is correct. So I need 20 electrons because electrons are negative, protons are positive.
Okay.
Okay, so then that tells me how many electrons. Okay, so number of neutrons are determined by your mass number. So this is normally This here is your atomic mass. So determine your mass number from this number, if we were just talking about calcium, not calcium 42. Calcium 42 is an isotope of calcium. We would round this to the nearest whole number. So 40.078. So if we were just talking about calcium, Ca. So what is this rounded to the nearest whole number?
41
Would it be 41?
or
This is a zero
40.
here. 40, yes. So in this case, the mass number for the calcium normal, or the calcium on our periodic table is 40. So the way that you calculate your number of neutrons is its mass number is equal to number of protons plus the number of neutrons. Okay, for calcium 42, which is our isotope of normal calcium, how many neutrons do I have? How would I calculate that? So this here is our new mass number. This here is the number of protons. So can I calculate my number of neutrons? Anybody can talk. Don't be shy. Megan.
So it's like 20 plus 20 would equal the 40?
Yes, in the case of the normal calcium, 20 plus 20 would equal to 40, right? So,
Okay.
or you'd say 20 plus whatever our number of neutrons, we're going to use an N naught because neutrons are neutrally charged,
Okay.
equals 40, right? And then you just solve for your N naught.
Which would be the 20?
That's right. In the case of the normal, but in the case of the isotope, where the new mass number is 42, we'd use 42 here.
Okay.
42 minus number of protons.
20.
Okay, and then we solve for N naught. Oops, should be a plus. So then we get N naught equals
22. 22.
22. There we go, right? So N naught equals 22. Piece of cake?
Sure.
Simple addition, right?
Sure.
Good. Okay, so that helps us to understand what an isotope is. An isotope, all an isotope is a variant of that atom that weighs more. And the reason why it weighs more is because it has more neutrons, more or less neutrons, okay, than the original atom does. So the normal atom weighs 40, the isotope weighs 42. And so the difference between those two are the number of neutrons. One has 2 extra neutrons. Make sense? Roll it out. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, good. Okay, if you can't answer, you can type into the chat and tell me, yeah, that makes sense. Or I have no idea what you just said. Okay. So let's see. So everybody remember that because we went over that last week, right?
Yep.
So let's go ahead and move forward. Okay, so now we know how many electrons and things like that. And you guys remember, the electrons are circling the nucleus. The nucleus has the protons and the neutrons in them. And you guys remember that, right? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, so, well, I'm going to assume that you do. So here, this is kind of an example of an atom. So this is letting us know that this is hydrogen. This is the nucleus of hydrogen. So technically it would have one proton in it. And this is the electron that is circling. Now, the guy that does all of the work in terms of reacting and stuff like that, which isn't going to be too surprising, is the electron. The electron is on the outside, so you have access to it, where the proton and the neutrons are on the inside. So you really don't have too much access to it unless you're doing nuclear fission reactions, which we aren't going to be doing currently, right? Or I don't think any of us are going to be doing anytime soon. Okay, so the electrons are going to be responsible for reacting. So the electrons, particularly that are responsible for reacting, you have some cases you have a lot of electrons, some you have a little bit. So in the case of hydrogen, you have one, right? So hydrogen has one electron that is able to use for reacting with others. Now, why would you want to react in general? Does anybody know why chemicals react? Can I ask you something? Are any of you guys married? Nobody's married? Is anybody planning on getting married?
No,
No?
I don't think
Wow,
so.
This is a rough crowd. Nobody, huh?
I'll bite.
You'll bite?
Yeah.
Okay, good. At least I have somebody who bites. So why are you planning on getting married?
Love reasons.
You said a lot of reasons.
Yeah, sure.
Balance each other out.
To balance each other out. Okay, so
That's a
that's
good one.
good.
So do you have
That's actually a pretty good answer. I like that one. Any other reason to get married? Is anybody getting married for money?
you want to share chores?
Sure.
Yeah. Split the
Share
load.
chores.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, it makes sense. When you're thinking about it, you're like, okay, it's going to be 50-50. They're going to do half the chores. I like that.
Lower
taxes.
taxes.
Right? Financial reasons, right?
There
And
you
if you
go.
think about the chore component, right? Less chores, less energy, things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the reason why two atoms come together are kind of the same way, right? They want stability. They want lower energy, right? So they don't want to work too hard. So let me tell you a little bit about the periodic table and some of the players on the periodic table so you can kind of get a better understanding. Then I'll ask you another question. Okay, so here's the periodic table. These guys in this pink, these guys are the noble gases right here. So how many of you guys went to high school? Only one of you guys went to high school. Thank you, Megan.
Oh,
So you made me worry. So none of you guys didn't go to high school, huh?
I didn't know what you
Man.
said, to be honest. I
What was that?
said I didn't understand what you had said. I went to high school, yeah.
You did go to high school. Okay.
No, I
Anyway.
did. I did go.
Nobody else did. Soledad, did you go to high school? Alexis?
Yeah, I went to high school.
Okay, yeah. So you guys have me worried here. I'm like, okay, maybe you should not be in this class if you've not finished high school yet. Okay, so in high school, what type of people are there? So you guys have those cool kids that cross the street to go smoke cigarettes and stuff like that. The cool kids.
No.
You guys didn't have any cool kids?
We had vapors.
We
Yeah.
had kids that would vape in the bathrooms.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, okay, okay. So, but were there anybody that you looked up to when you were in high school? Those
No.
type of kids. There's nobody
No.
you did.
No,
Okay.
definitely
Okay.
not.
Wow, so this is going to be really hard then, right?
Some cool
Okay.
guy.
So we'll try this. What about noble? What does noble mean to you? If we talk about nobility, what does it mean to you?
Honest. Trustworthy.
Honest? Trustworthy?
Mhm.
Huh. That's interesting. It's funny because when I think about noble, I think about Game of Thrones. Anybody watch Game of Thrones?
I think of higher ups.
Oh, so no. You guys think about those old time movies, like fantasy movies, where there's a king and there's,
His
rich people who owns lots of lands, and then there's the poor people, right? So most of the elements are like the poor people. The noble are kind of like rich. They're stable. They have stability, right? And so if you guys think about it, right, big term, big picture, stability. Stability is the reason why we do a lot of things. So let me ask. I'm going to ask Soledad since she's promising not to answer me, right? So Soledad, I'm going to ask you once again. I'm going to ask you a question. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Okay, so then you're going to answer this question for me. So if I was this rich prince from, let's say, Uganda, right? And I owned this huge amount of land, a beautiful castle, and I have all these cars and, all of these acres and all these good things. And I come up to you and I'm saying, Soledad, you are the best looking woman I've ever met in my entire life. I love your eyes. Would you marry me? You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to sleep with me. Would you marry me?
No.
You wouldn't marry me? Okay. Okay. Alejandro, if I come to you and said exactly the same thing, would you marry me?
Aw.
Said yes.
Aw.
Bruh,
He said, give me money.
you give me money. Exactly, right? Okay. So I'm going to be honest. I'd be like, okay, so where do I sign the paper? Let's go, right? Be instant gratification. Okay. So one of the reasons why we do this, why we get married, why we do stuff is for stability, right? How many of you guys say, I'm going to marry a crackhead? That's who I want to marry. Anybody say that? So that, since you know
No.
me, are you gonna marry the crackhead?
No.
No, right? So nobody plans to marry a crackhead. You may end up marrying a crackhead, but you don't plan on it. It's not something that you say, top of my list, marry a crackhead. You're thinking, I'm gonna be stable, I'm gonna have money, I'm gonna have a car, I'm gonna be, So one of the reasons why we do things is for stability. That's gonna be the same thing here with these elements. So the elements want stability. The noble gases are stable. So everybody wants to be like the Johnsons. They want to be like the noble gases. So you're going to ask me, how are they stable? So they're stable because they have their outer shell completely filled with electrons. So let me show you again that little figure that we had. And I'm going to go back and forth between the periodic table and this. So this is basically showing you the outer shell. So this is the electron. Hydrogen isn't a noble gas. It wants to be like helium, which is a noble gas, right? Helium has 2 electrons. So hydrogen wants to get 1 more electron to be like helium, right? Carbon has 6 electrons around it, right? Neon has 8 electrons around it. Carbon wants to be like neon. So it wants to sit there and have a total of 8 electrons around it. So 8 plus 2, so it's a total of 10. I'll explain that to you here in a second. But that outer shell, in that outer shell, it has 8 electrons. It wants to have 8 electrons in that outer shell. Okay. Carbon has 4 electrons in that outer shell. Okay. So it's going to do whatever it can to sit there and try to get those 4 electrons to be like neon. Okay. So let me see one more thing. These electrons in this outer shell, these are called your valence electrons. These electrons are available for reacting, these 4. This 1 electron for hydrogen is available for reacting, but it only needs 1 more electron to be like helium. So it's going to try to get that 1 electron to be like helium. and carbon is going to try to get those 4 electrons to be like neon. Okay, so this guy, he's fat and happy, right? He's got all the money he needs, all the stability he needs. He don't need anybody, right? He's independent, you know? Okay. So in that context, right, the elements on your periodic table that are not noble gases are trying to be like a noble gas, right? And the way that they're trying to be like a noble gas is to gain those electrons. So we said carbon needed 4. So this is where carbon's at. So if carbon gets 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to be like neon. So carbon is kind of it's in a funny place because carbon could also lose 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and be like helium, right? Most cases, carbon's going to try to gain 4 rather than lose 4, but under special circumstances, it will lose 4. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because carbon is kind of a special beast in itself. So sodium is right here. So sodium has the opportunity to either gain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, be like argon, or just lose 1 electron and be like neon. So if you have the opportunity to mow 1 lawn and get paid $500, or mow 7 lawns and get paid $500, what would you do?
Mow the 1.
You'd mow the 1. Doesn't that make sense?
Mhm.
Right? Okay, so in that case, sodium is just like you. Sodium's lazy. He's like, hell no. He's like, I'm not going to do all that extra work for just the same amount. No way. You're going to find the easiest way, and the one that costs you easiest way, least amount of energy possible to do. So it's going to lose that 1 electron to be like neon. Now, when it does that, sodium normally has how many electrons?
$11.
11. I'm just testing you. I'm seeing because we just talked about it. I'm like, okay, we're going to see how many people paid attention. How many protons?
11.
11. Okay, so if I have 11 plus charges and I have 11 minus charges and I put them all together, what is my overall charge?
11.
11, are you sure? 11 plus
22.
minus 11.
0. Never mind.
0.
Just kidding. 0.
You're just testing me out, right?
Whew.
Seeing if I was paying attention, right? So 11 positive, 11 minus is going to equal 0, right? 11 minus 11. We all agree. Okay. Thumbs up, some type of sign to let me know that you're alive. And kick it. Okay, so here's my next thing. So if we lose 1 electron, we now have 10 electrons. So we have 10 electrons now. I'm going to use this E minus for electrons. And I'm going to use a P plus for protons. I still have 11 pluses. So then what is the charge I have on that sodium now? If I have 11 plus charges and 10 minus charges.
+1.
Plus 1. So then my sodium, when it forms an ion, is going to be a +1 charge. You guys get that?
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to see, right? Okay, so if I have magnesium, magnesium is right next to sodium, right? So magnesium also wants to be like neon, right? So how many electrons does it have to lose to be like neon?
2, so it'd become a
2.
+2.
Okay, so the charge on magnesium would be +2. Or we write it in chemistry as 2+. Okay, simple? Okay, so this guy, since they're positive ions, these are called ions. Since these guys are positive ions, they're called cations. Okay, because cations are positive. Cat, pa, pa. You get it?
Oh. I like that.
Okay, it's a bad joke, I know.
I liked it.
Positive. Okay, so cations are positive ions. Okay, so here we have fluorine. Fluorine is like one away from being like neon. It has to gain just one electron and it'll be just like neon. So it's going to do that. So what is going to be the charge on fluorine if it gains one electron?
-1.
So we're going to put a negative. So it's going to be -1 because it gained one electron. Okay. What about nitrogen?
-3.
Because it's 3 away. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And these negative ions are called anions. Okay. Simple. Good job, Alejandro. Gabriela, you get it? Good. Okay. So let's see. Now, how many of you guys dated when you were in high school? That's probably the reason why none of you guys want to get married now, because you guys dated when you were in high school. All of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Be honest, maybe. Okay. You weren't sure if you dated Alejandro? You're like, well, maybe we were. I wasn't quite sure about that. Okay, so when you're in high school, did you come home one day and you're like, Mom, I met the cutest boy ever. He is so charming. And he asked me out, Mom. I love him. Oh, he's my boo. I love him. I love him. I love him.
Yes, that was me
Yeah.
exactly.
Those exact words.
Yes.
You told her. You told her who it was. Oh, it was Johnny Jamerson.
How'd you know his name?
What? John, his dad was a dirty dog.
Damn.
His brother's a dirty dog. His uncle's a dirty dog. His whole family are dirty dogs. They're criminals. They're drug dealers. You know, you ain't spending any time with them. None whatsoever. That ain't gonna happen. No, I refuse to let you date him. You better go and break up with him right now. Okay? Now, how many of you guys went there and broke up with Johnny James?
Nah.
Exactly. I hear crickets, right?
I still dated
Now
him.
you guys say one thing. You're like, no. You're like, no, I can change him. I can make him a good man, right? That's what I said. Why? Why didn't you break up with him?
He has a
I
good
feel
heart.
What was that?
I feel like I'm in a therapy session or something. Oh no.
Well, you didn't break up with him because opposites attract. You were attracted to him because he was a bad boy. You know, if he was a good boy, you'd be like, you know, you'd fight with him all the time. It would have never worked out, right? So opposites attract. So positives are going to be attracted
Accurate.
to negatives. And if they balance each other out perfectly, it works out great. If they don't, then that's an issue, right? So you want to try to balance each other out perfectly. So let's say, for instance, we have sodium and chloride. Sodium is going to be, as we saw earlier, it's going to form a plus ion. So it's going to lose an electron. And chlorine is actually going to take its electron and make itself negative because it's only one away. So then if I put sodium and chloride together, it forms sodium chloride. where we don't have any charges on them because they balance each other out. You guys see that? And you guys know what sodium chloride is, right? Anyone? Salt, exactly. Sodium chloride is salt. Thank you, Alejandro. Okay, so let's see. If I have magnesium and let's do phosphorus. So what is going to be the charge on the magnesium?
Plus
If it
2.
forms +2, right? It's 2 away, right? 1, 2, be like neon. Okay, what about the phosphorus? How far is it away?
3.
3 away from argon. So then it would be obviously 3. 3 what? 3 minus or 3 plus? 3 minus. That is correct because it's gaining electrons. Okay, so if I put these two together, how many magnesium am I going to need to balance out my phosphorus? So right now we have a 2 minus 3. Does that equal 0?
No.
Okay, so what if I add another magnesium? I'm going to erase this so it looks a little clearer. I know I have stuff everywhere. So if you blink, you're going to miss out what I'm talking about, right? So if I add another magnesium, does that balance it out?
Yes.
It does. So that's
Well,
2.
wouldn't the magnesium become 3 if you add one more? So it went from 2 to 3?
So no, because it has a +2 charge. We're not changing the ions. So we have +2 plus 2. So 2 times 2 is what?
4.
Okay, so that's 4, right? So 4 minus 3. Does that balance out? Does that equal 0?
That equals 1.
That equals 1, right? So what about if we add another phosphorus? So then that's 4 minus 6. Does that balance out? Four minus 6, does that equal 0?
No.
No, right? So that equals 2. So that doesn't balance out. But if I add one more magnesium, so that's 2, that's 2, that's 2. So what is 2 plus 2 plus 2?
6.
6. So 6 minus 6?
0.
Okay. So then the way that we would write this is Mg. This tells me I have 1, 2, 3 of those. And then the phosphorus, I have 2 of those. So Mg3P2. That's right, Alejandro and Whitney. Okay. Okay, so at the end of the day, they have to balance out. And if you notice, when I write this here, it doesn't have any of the charges because the charges are balanced out. We want to show it with charges to let us know that it's balanced out. If you put a charge up here, you're saying that one of these have more charges than they're supposed to. And that's not the case. Are you with me? Victoria?
Yes, I'm here.
You're here?
Yes.
But are you with me?
Sort of, kind of, not really.
Sort of, kind of, not really. So you want to try one more?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so let's do oxygen and, let's see, clear all. Oxygen and it's oxygen and potassium. Okay. Okay, where's oxygen located at? So these guys up here are called the group. This is the period. So if you can tell me the group that it's in and the period it's in.
Group 16, period 2.
Okay. So it's right there. And then what about potassium?
Is that group 10, period 6?
Potassium?
Potassium?
Potassium.
Oh, that's platinum. My bad. I'm sorry. Oops.
Okay.
Oh, group 16, period 6?
Group 16, period 6.
Yikes.
So that's palladium.
Oh my gosh, my old eyes. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
God.
That's right, Grandma.
Group
Like,
1,
guys.
period 4.
Group 1, period 4. It's right here.
Yikes. Thank you.
Now, when the old man is calling you Grandma, you got to worry about that a little bit, right?
Jeez. You
Okay.
laced or something.
So potassium is going to be what charge? So K is going to be what charge? I heard somebody.
+1.
Positive. And then oxygen is going to be what charge?
-2.
Okay. So how many potassiums am I going to need to balance out my oxygen? So I'm going to need, I heard somebody say it underneath their breath, 2,
2.
right? So we always write the positive first. So the potassium comes first. So it'll be K2. Oh, piece of cake.
Where is the 2 coming from on that oxygen? That -2?
Because oxygen is located here.
Mhm.
And when it forms an ion, it's going to gain 2 electrons to be like the noble gas neon. So remember, when they're forming ionic compounds, they want to try to gain the electrons to be like a noble gas. So in this case, oxygen needs 2 electrons to be like a noble gas. So it's going to gain those 2 electrons. Does that help?
Yes. So what was it for potassium? I'm sorry. Or
So
did we not?
potassium, yeah,
we not-
potassium is, oh, sorry. Potassium is right here. Phosphorus for some reason. Potassium, K, is right here, right? So
Yeah.
for it to be like a noble gas, it has 2 options, right? It has the easy way or the hard way. It's always going to go the easy way. The easy way is to lose 1 electron, to be like argon.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
The hard way would be to gain all of these electrons and be like krypton.
Gotcha.
You know, I'm lazy. I'm not going to lie to anybody. I am lazy as anything. If somebody told me all I have to do was say hi to get an A, I just come in and say hi and get an A, right? There'd be no argument. Okay. So the electrons are, I mean, the atoms are very much the same way. They want to try to find the easiest way that takes the least amount of energy to try and get things done.
Okay.
Okay, questions?
So potassium would then be a +1?
So potassium would be a +1, that's right. Oxygen would be a -2, and each potassium is a +1. So it takes 2 of them to balance it out.
Okay. And then kind of in the middle of the table that says K2O?
Yeah, that's what yes, that would be the name of the compound, potassium oxide.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Good question. Okay, so good. So this is perfect. So you guys get to show me how good you are at this, right? And that you totally understand this, and this is like your wheelhouse. So I'm going to give you a couple of elements that are going to be working together. to form a compound, an ionic compound, and these are called ionic compounds, or ionic bonds. So let's do calcium plus, let's do sulfur, and then we'll do lithium plus phosphorus, and barium plus nitrogen. Okay, so let's see, how many people? So how many of you guys know how to annotate? All of you?
On Zoom, like on the whiteboard, we write?
Yep.
I think
No.
so, yeah.
No idea.
So if you can
Yeah,
do it,
I don't know.
so the way that you would do it is at the very top of the screen, you should see you're viewing Dr. Henry's screen. You see that? So if you go to options up there, or you'll see more with 3 dots on it, and you go down to annotate, and that's spelled ANNOTATE. Click on it, and then you should see another menu bar come up. Okay, so if you guys can do me a favor, hit the, it says draw, and then click on the squiggly line, and then write your name on the side over here. Excellent. Okay, so we got a couple of team leaders. So
I
we'll
do
have,
not know how to control my pen.
we'll have Alejandro and Whitney. You guys are the team leaders. I'm going to split you guys up into 2 groups, and then you guys are going to answer these 3 questions. Or you're going to give me the ionic compounds for these three elements that are reacting. Okay?
Okay.
You understand what I'm asking for?
Yes.
Okay, so if you guys can do me a favor, hit save. So you can save the screen. And so then that way, when I put you guys in your groups, then you'll be able to do it. So I'm gonna kick you into a breakout room.
Hello. How'd it go, everyone?
Good.
Yeah, did you guys get it?
Mhm.
Oh. Well, Dr. Henry went to go get coffee. So let's start with the first one. Ca plus S. What did group 1 get?
I don't know what our group numbers were.
Okay, let's just go with Whitney's group then, since it
Okay.
seems to be you here.
It was, yeah, it was CAS, calcium sulfur, just 1, 1.
Ah. Let's see. I was gonna write it, but it seems I did not have my annotate up. Dr. Henry got me.
Okay, what about the lithium phosphorus?
You want me to answer that one too?
No, I want somebody from room 2. Oh, you were room 2. I'm sorry, room 1.
So Alejandro's group, I believe.
Yes, Alejandro, Alexis, Gabriella. She's talking. I see her talking.
Li3P is what they got.
Li3P. P3?
No, Li3.
Oh, Li3P.
Sorry,
Okay.
I might have said it wrong, but they got Li3P.
Okay. And then group 2, you guys can do the last one.
We got Ba3 and 2.
Ba3 and 2. So everybody's feeling comfortable? Yes, no, maybe?
I think it's just practicing it a little bit more. I mean, I was just telling Whitney too, like the periodic table is so new to me. So even trying to find everything as quickly as I can, I'm like, oh, but I think with some time and continuing to practice them, it'll be okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
To be honest.
Okay. So these are examples of ionic bonds. So these are ionic bonds that are forming together. And it's solely based upon attraction, electrostatic charges. So that plus or that minus, right? And remembering that they have to balance each other out. Okay. Let's see. Let me clear the screen. Okay, so ionic bonding. Again, this is just gives you all that detail. So here we have the sodium. Sodium is going to get rid of one electron. Chlorine is going to take that electron. And then they're going to come together because one is positive, sodium is positive, and the chloride is negative. And then they're going to form an ionic compound with alternating structures of that positive, that negative, that positive, that negative, that positive, that negative. Now these bonds are strong. This is a strong bond, except when you put water in it, then it becomes weak. But that's a whole nother topic, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. And so like if we have sodium chloride, salt, have you guys ever tried to melt salt?
To melt salt?
Melt salt, yeah.
No, I don't think so.
No. So if you put it in your frying pan, does it melt? No. It don't melt, right? Salt won't melt. So salt will melt at 600 degrees Celsius. How many of your stoves go up to 600 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit, Celsius? None of them do, right? So it takes a lot of energy to sit there and melt salt, right? So really to sit there and disrupt this bond or to break this bond down to some extent, it takes a lot of energy. So there's another type of bond. So we have ionic bonds that we just talked about. We also have what we call covalent bonds. Okay, so there's one other thing I should add before we go to covalent bonds. Go back to the periodic table. So ionic bonds are always formed between metals and non-metals. So you have a metal and a non-metal to form ionic bonds. Sometimes your metalloids will also form ionic bonds. Metalloids are, so metals are, they're able to conduct electricity, they're malleable, they're all to do that. And these are all your metals right here. Okay, so by me just passing over it, all the ones that are highlighted in the different colors represents all the metals. So those are all your metals. Metalloids are, they're between metals and non-metals. So they're elements that act like metals sometimes, but act like non-metals other times. And so they're kind of flexible. And then we have our non-metals. So both sets of these are non-metals. So again, noble gases, and these are reactive non-metals. So these metals here in the green, those are the ones that are going to be reactive. You know, although the noble gases can react, but it's very rare that they will. Not something that they really want to do. They often will get forced into it, you know, bad relationship, you know, things like that. Questions so far? Okay, so when non-metals react with each other, they form what we call a covalent bond. So I want you to sit there and think about this. This is one way that I remember the difference between a covalent bond and a ionic bond. If your neighbor had a kick-ass bicycle. Like, it is the best bicycle in the world, you know, or motorcycle in the world, whatever you want to say. Like, they have a kick-ass bike. So your neighbor right next to you have a kick-ass bike, and then there's this guy that's 3 towns over that has the same kick-ass bike. Okay. Now, you go to your neighbor. Are you gonna ask to borrow your neighbor's bike? You know, say, hey man, can we share your bike? Or are you gonna sit there and steal it?
I would prefer to ask, but that's just me.
You would prefer to ask, right?
Yeah, I want to steal.
And I mean, logically, let's think about this logistically as well, right? So logistically, now if you stole from your neighbor and he saw his bike, you riding his bike the very next day, that his bike got stolen, then what do you think your neighbor's gonna do?
Can I get you in trouble?
You're gonna go to jail, right?
Yeah.
So chances are you stealing from your neighbor is not a good idea, right? So you're gonna share with your neighbor, right? So these guys are neighbors. So they're gonna share with each other, okay? And so non-metals, when they form bonds together, they're gonna form what we call covalent bonds, where ionic bonds is kind of like that guy across town, right? So you're this guy over here, so you're just gonna take what you want, right? Because it's about give and take. These guys are gonna be giving up electrons, and you're gonna wanna take electrons because you wanna be like a noble gas, right? So you're gonna take from it, okay? So when you're working with 2 nonmetals, let's say carbon and hydrogen, or you're going to be sharing electrons. So sharing electrons means that you're forming a covalent bond. How many of you guys are the oldest sibling?
Yep, I am.
And how many of you guys are the youngest sibling? Okay, so I'm an older sibling. I'm the oldest of 3 children. I have 2 sisters. So during Christmas time, we're a pretty poor family. My parents would get us one gift, like one really good gift. So we like, one year we got an Atari, right? And I know I'm dating myself, but it's true. We had an Atari. And so the stipulation was that we had to share, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm all about science. I've been about science since I was a little kid. I knew about electrons when I was real young and stuff like that. And so I was using the logic of science, right? So I'm like, my mom had said that we had to share. So I'm like, okay, I get on the Atari, I play it for 90% of the time. And then like right before my mom got home and everything like that, I'd give it to my sisters for about 10% of the time. And then I get back on it, right? I'm like, oh, they had their turn. And then it's my turn again, right? And my little sister told on me, right? And then I told my mom, I said, well, Mom, I said, it's just like science, right? I said, I'm sharing like you told me to, right? So wasn't I sharing?
You were, yeah.
Yeah, by definition of sharing, I was sharing. So there's 2 types of sharing, right? So there's what we call even sharing, right? And then there's uneven sharing. So when we're talking about uneven sharing, we're talking about molecules like water, H2O. You guys are familiar with H2O, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the electrons between oxygen and hydrogen are being shared, but they're being shared unevenly. So what we do is we draw, this is a delta. Delta minus and delta plus. It represents like a weak positive charge. In this case, I can make my positive. Okay, it's a weak positive charge here. She uses a different color so it doesn't look like it's part of the element. Like, man, what in the hell is that thing? She's green. Anybody colorblind? Red, green colorblind?
Mm-mm.
So the hydrogen is partially positive, meaning that the electron is spending more time around the oxygen than it is spinning around the hydrogen. And the oxygen is partially negative. Right? And that makes sense because you have this electron around you most of the time, so you're going to feel that more negative over there than it is on the other side. Okay? So this is called polar. Covalent bonding. So where these here are being shared almost evenly, right? So this guy is called nonpolar. Covalent bonding. So covalent bonding is just sharing electrons, right? So it's bonds where you're sharing the electrons. Electrons spend some time with me, electrons spend some time with you. Okay, and we have two types of covalent bonds. We have a polar covalent bond and a non-polar covalent. With me? So let me show you some more examples. You're like, man, I thought this was physiology. Why am I learning chemistry, right? Okay, so here, this here's hydrogen, which just two hydrogen gas. So it's kind of like twins interacting with each other. So they're sharing evenly because they're both exactly the same strength. They're pulling the electron the same way. And the way you determine whether you're sharing evenly or unevenly is how strong you are, right? And that's dependent on where you're located at, kind of on the periodic table. And more specifically, it's dealing with what we call electronegativity. Your electronegativity determines how much pull you have for that electron. So you're going to be able to pull it strongly, okay? So here we have oxygen. Oxygen forms what we call the double bond. And it's sharing, so this one is sharing, each of them are contributing one electron that they're sharing. So they're sharing a total of 2 electrons. This line represents 2 electrons. Here, I'm going to draw these extra electrons. They're sharing 4 electrons. So each line represents 2 electrons. So they're sharing a total of 4 electrons. Okay. And then this guy, the carbon is sharing 2 electrons here with the oxygen. I mean, a total of 4 electrons between this oxygen and a total of another 4 electrons between this oxygen. Okay. So each of them contributing 2. So carbon's contributing 2 electrons here, and 2 electrons there. Okay. Are you with me? And so that's being shown right here. That's those double bonds. Okay. So each of these are examples of non-polar covalent bonding. Non-polar. Because in both cases, they're sharing evenly. Now, this one is a special case because if you look at the carbon and this oxygen, right? This oxygen has a stronger pull. So the arrow or the electron is going to be pulled more this way. But then the sharing between this one is going to be pulled the same way. And they're the same strength. So it's going to be pulled evenly on both sides. So it's kind of like you're in the middle and you have these twins that are exactly the same size, exactly the same strength, if they're both pulling you, right, and you're on a chair, is either of them going to pull you more than the other?
No.
No. You're going to just kind of stay in the middle because they're the exact same strength. Right? Okay. So those are examples of nonpolar covalent bonding. Okay. Now, if I have HOCl, right? Or actually, let me be more specific because okay, so in this case, right, we have oxygen bonded to the hydrogen, bonded to the fluorine. Okay, so fluorine has a strong electronegativity, so the electron is going to be pulled more this way than it is going to be pulled towards the hydrogen, right? And as a matter of fact, the hydrogen is weaker than the oxygen, so it's also going to be being pulled this way. So overall, if we looked at added these two together, the overall is going in this direction. Okay, so then in that case, it's like me being pulled to this side and just dragging the hydrogen along with us. Okay, are you with me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so this is an example of polar. Just like the water is also polar. Okay, so I'm surprised nobody asked me, but oxygen has two hydrogens on both sides. How is it polar? Well, it's polar because overall the direction that the electrons are going is up towards the oxygen. It's not like they're being pulled out towards the hydrogen. So in that case, it's not going to be an even pull because oxygen is stronger than the hydrogen. So the way that you determine strength, one of the quick and easy ways to determine strength, particularly on elements that are in the same period. You guys remember what's the period and what's the group? So these are your periods. These up here are your groups. So if they're in the same period, the closer you are to being a noble gas, the stronger you're going to be. So fluorine is stronger than oxygen. Oxygen is stronger than nitrogen. Nitrogen is stronger than carbon. Carbon is stronger than boron. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's the closest that you are to be that noble gas. Okay. So that's the same thing down here. Same group, same way. Okay. So typically these guys are stronger than these guys, so on and so forth. Okay. Okay, so let's go back. Oops. Okay, so water, again, is a polar covalent molecule. So again, that's showing you what the delta looks like in print instead of my crazy handwriting. So this is hydrogen, this is your oxygen, and you can see them sharing the electrons here. So these electrons are spending more time around the oxygen than they are around hydrogen, hence they're partially positive. So they're a weak positive charge, and then this one is weakly negative. And this is just showing you the structure of a water molecule, and this is just showing you a ball and stick structure. Okay, so water. So how much of your body is made up of water?
75%.
Okay, so from 60 to 75% is water. So a large percentage of your body is water. Now, water plays a very key role, right? And so since so much of it is water, water also interacts with itself, water molecules. So they also form what we call a hydrogen bond. Okay, so covalent bonds are kind of like people with handshakes, like you're shaking their hand and you're not letting it go, right? So it's a strong bond. It's really, really, really strong. It takes a lot of energy to break, you know? So it's going to take a lot of energy to sit there and break somebody who's had a strong handshake with somebody else, right? So where hydrogen bond is kind of like this, it's like that interaction. So if I was in a wheelie chair and Alejandro was in a wheelie chair and we were fist bumping together, would it be easy to pull us apart? Yeah, no, maybe.
If you're in a wheelchair?
Let's say not a wheelchair, rolly chair, you know, a
Oh,
chair
I
with
could think
wheels.
so. Oh.
Yeah.
Would it be easy to pull you apart? Yeah.
Yeah, because we're fist bumping, right? So we're just touching each other, right? So
Right.
that's sort of what a hydrogen bond is compared to a covalent bond, where a covalent bond is like me and him are holding hands, really tight to each other. So is it going to be easy to pull us apart if we're holding hands really tight to each other?
No.
No, it's going to take a whole lot of energy. So that's kind of like your covalent bond. The fist bump is kind of like your hydrogen. So hydrogen bond is reliant on those interactions, right? Those weak interactions. So this is weakly negative, and this is weakly positive. And so that's just that interaction, that plus and that minus charge again are interacting, but these are weak plus and minus charges. So have you guys play with magnets?
Yes.
Have you played with the ones that are like the boards here, like these guys? They're big round ones and stuff that are really, really weak, right? So those are kind of like the hydrogen bond, because you put two of those together, it's really easy to pull apart. Where you get a really strong magnet, two really strong magnets, and it takes energy to have these two right here. Like it's worth to sit there and pull them apart, right? So this here represents, remember our ionic is like that strong positive. So plus one positive. So these guys are partial positive, right? They're not even plus one, they're much less. They're like 0.001% positive, and the other one's like 0.001% negative. So they're not strong like you would have in the case of the really strong magnets. So this is kind of like our ionic bond, and this is kind of like our hydrogen bond. So now we've talked about 4 types of bonds. Can you tell me the 4 types of bonds that we talked about?
Polar covalent, nonpolar, hydrogen, and covalent.
Polar covalent, nonpolar, covalent. And can you distinguish between them? Hydrogen, and the other one was ionic.
Oh, ionic. Oops.
So can you distinguish between our polar covalent bond, our ionic bond, our hydrogen bond, our non-polar covalent bond? So you guys know about DNA, right? DNA is a double helix. Is that true?
Is a double what?
A double helix.
I know nothing about DNA.
You know nothing about DNA? Anybody
No,
know anything?
I'm like beginner science student.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. It's a process, right? We're learning again.
Yeah. Jeez.
Okay, so DNA is a double helix. The way that DNA, so that means there's one strand here and there's one strand here, and it comes together by hydrogen bonds. So a whole bunch of hydrogen bonds together are strong enough to hold it together that it takes energy to sit there and separate it to the different strands. So it's strong enough. So hydrogen bonds are what we call cooperative. Okay, so the more you have, the stronger it can be, right? And so if you only have 2 hydrogen bonds, it's really weak, you know, or 1 hydrogen bond is really weak. But if you have 1,000, then it's strong. It takes a lot more energy to sit there and separate. It still can be separated, but it takes time and energy to separate. Okay.
Gotcha.
It's so much better doing this in class, because then you can do fist bumps and then Have you guys used to play Red Overs, and Johnny Right Over? You guys used to play that game?
Yeah, way
Great
back.
way of learning bonds. Okay, so let's talk about chemical reactions. Okay, so there's going to be four major chemical reactions in the body. We're going to talk about three of them right now. These three are the most abundant. The last one occurs, but not as frequent. So the first one is called a synthesis reaction. So a synthesis reaction is where you have two or more components, and then you're bringing them together to make one larger molecule. Okay, so this typically requires energy, typically, not always, but typically requires energy. And then when it requires energy, the energy is going to be stored in the bonds that are keeping those two together. So kind of like sugar synthesis is an example of a synthesis reaction. We also have decomposition. So decomposition is where you have a molecule, a large molecule, and it's being broken down into smaller parts, smaller products. So example here, we have bookworm being broken down into book plus worm. Okay. So in this case, again, you're having a large molecule being broken down into two smaller parts. We have what we call the girlfriend exchange or boyfriend exchange, depending on the way you look at it, or the exchange reaction, where you're substituting one thing for another thing. So here we have notebook plus worm, and then now we get note plus bookworm. So questions, concerns? So this is also called the single replacement reaction, where you're just replacing that one thing. And then the last one is called a double replacement. Or I also like to call it the swingers reaction. Okay, so the example of this is okay, we have notebook plus iPad yields iBook plus notepad. So in this case, notebook is hooking up with pad. Let me say, I'm sorry, note is hooking up with pad. And I is hooking up with book. Okay, so they're switching partners, swingers reaction. Okay, so 4 chemical reactions. So there is a question. It says, is there a common pattern to these reactions? So I'm not sure what you're asking me, but basically these three occur commonly, and I'll give you an example of how they occur. Like for instance, we use one for building things, and then we use one for breaking things down, right? So if you guys remember, last week we talked about metabolism versus anabolism. Both of those are considered metabolism. They're the opposites in a metabolic function, right? So metabolism is what? Is that building or is that breaking? If you're catabolizing something, are you breaking it down or are you building? Anybody remember?
Breaking it down.
Okay. Catabolism is breaking it down. Anabolism is building it up. Right? So those are, they work together to make your metabolism, right? So we break down fat and then we build up your muscle, right? So they kind of work together in that process. So often they'll be opposites of each other working in a process together. Is that what you're asking me, Alejandro? Yes. So there is, for instance, and I neglected to tell you this, every time that you're writing the chemical compound, so the way that we normally do it, like let's say we have sodium chloride plus potassium oxide. So the way that you would do this is positives are gonna switch with the negative. So then you'd have sodium oxide. And then you'd end up with potassium chloride. Okay, so this guy is going to match up with that. So your positive is always going to go first. With your positive is going to replace a positive, and your negative is going to replace a negative for the swinging reaction. Okay. Okay. Questions, concerns, Cash? Good. Okay, so the other thing that you need to know about is enzymes. So your body uses tons and tons and tons of enzymes. The way enzymes work, they serve two purposes. They are mainly there to speed up reactions, right? So here we have an example of a reaction that is occurring without enzymes. So here are your reactants. You have to get over this activation energy and then go down this hill to get a product, right? So most reactions require a certain amount of energy before you can make your product, right? So with an enzyme actually causes your reaction to occur without having to put so much energy in to get over that hump. So these reactions occur faster, typically, so they typically speed up reactions by lowering the activation energy. Okay, so that way you're not putting in as much energy and it's happening so much faster. So for instance, a lot of reactions in your body, like let's say your food digestion, it can happen independent of an enzyme, but it would take years for it to happen, right? Compared to nanoseconds. So it's really the difference, that much of a difference between the two. Okay? Questions? Let's see. Do people that lack the lactose enzyme encounter this? Yes. So that's why it takes them so long to sit there and digest anything that has lactose in it, right? So they get all bloated and, you know, because then they're relying solely on the they're not able to break it down, but they're relying on the microorganisms in their gut to break it down. So it takes longer and it sits around longer. And then so they get bloated with all the gas and everything because you're feeding all of the bacteria rather than you breaking it down yourself. Make sense? So that's why you get all farty, you know? Okay. So an example of this, and an example that you're going to encounter several times when we're talking about the body itself, is the dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis. Dehydration synthesis, that kind of speaks for itself. Synthesis, the synthesis reaction is what? Is that building it up or is that tearing it down?
Building it up.
Building it up. So we build it up by dehydrating the molecules. So what we're doing is removing water from those molecules. So these guys are going to come together. So monomer 1 and monomer 2 can be bound covalently, and then we get water released as well. So dehydration, right? So how many of you guys want to build muscle? I want ripped, big old chest, and you know, those thighs, you know, ripped, veiny thighs and everything like that. Anybody? Okay, so I went through that first stage. You know, I was like at the gym all the time. I would get up and I'd take my morning pre-workout. It was called Jacked. I think they still sell it. Can't remember. Now, all it was a diuretic. So it basically dehydrates you, right? And so what would happen was I'd take it 30 minutes before I work out, and then I have to go poop like crazy, right? And then afterwards, I go and I pump up. And I mean, it worked. I got bigger and I started, you know, getting tons and tons of muscles in the places that I wanted and things like that. But it was at a cost of that dehydration, right? And so if I didn't hydrate at some point, I'd cramp up because, you know, I just let out all the water that was also helping me tear down some of the things that I needed to tear down in addition to building up. Okay? So dehydration results in us building, where hydrolysis, hydro means water, lysis means breaking down. Okay, so we're using water to break things down. So in this case, water is being used to sit there and break down these two monomers. And so it splits the water molecule OH goes to one of the monomers, H goes to the other, and then we get two independent monomers that we've broken down from that one together. So this guy would be an example of what type of reaction? So if this was synthesis, it was what?
Decomposition.
Decomposition, exactly. So your body is constantly using this, right? So in the case of fat, right, we use for when you're supposedly trying to lose weight, you should be drinking a lot of water. One of the reasons why you need to drink a lot of water is because you need water to break down those fat molecules so that you can burn it off, you know? Make sense?
Yes.
I know you all want to fit into your prom dresses, right? Someday. Right? I know Jesse does.
I try very hard to fit in my dress.
Oh.
Okay, so what time is it? How are we doing on time? Did we run over?
Just a little.
A little over. God, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll pick this up. And we'll start talking about dissociation of sodium chloride on Wednesday. However, we'll use this time to talk about the lab real quick. So, Jesse, you want to give your spill? Let me stop sharing. Or should I start? Let me start with Labster, and then you start with your spill. Okay, so you guys have Labster that is due this week. How many of you guys already done it?
I did.
Excellent. You go. Yes, last week I had a little trouble getting it started, so that it would actually work on Canvas, but now it should be working. So if you guys go to modules on your Canvas shell, let me share my screen. Usually all your assignments are going to fall into place after the chapter or in the chapter that we're currently working on. So if you go to the bottom of chapter 1, that is your very first lab. That is homeostasis control. If you click on it directly and then click the link at the bottom, it'll actually open it up for you. And it takes a little bit of time to get it started, but it should work. If you're having troubles with it, I'm going to tell you, you want to make sure that you're using Chrome or Firefox. And it's, as I say, we recommend using Firefox rather than Chrome, but they both work. Firefox and Chrome works. And sometimes you can get Safari to work, but not all of the time. So try those browsers. And all you have to do is download those browsers onto your computer. Now, it does take a while, and it takes longer if you have 150 windows open like I do. And then a lot of times it won't let you complete it or do any of the lab because you have so many windows open. Because it usually takes so much energy to sit there or so much memory to sit there and run the programs. Come on today. It worked this morning, so hopefully it'll, okay. So then you go ahead and hit start. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that'll kind of get you started on how to do the lab. Any questions? I see a question. So no, you're not, we are not, so anytime that you guys are doing simulations, you do not have to come to lab for those days that you're doing simulations. You can come to lab if you have questions. I'm just gonna help you answer the questions, but we're not gonna do it together. You're just gonna go ahead and do it on your own. If you have any questions about it, you can ask me. I usually will be in your lab hours to sit there and answer those questions. But short of that, that's about it. Questions so far? So you guys have already read chapters 1 and chapters 2, right? So you guys need to start reading chapters 3 and chapters 4. So.
Okay. And you didn't want, did you still want the reading summary for chapters 1 and 2?
Yeah, so instead, that's why I'm giving you guys the chapter quizzes.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's going to be a trade-off. Is that fair, or do you guys want to do reading summaries instead? And your chapter quizzes are open book.
Well,
Open
I'll
book
take
and open notes.
the quiz. I'll
Okay.
take it. That's fine with me.
Okay. Let's see.
And those
So-
are, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The quizzes are going to be posted in our Canvas, right?
Yep, they're going to be posted in Canvas Fridays.
Perfect. Okay. And then we complete it the same day, Friday.
You can complete it, well, you have from Friday till Monday evening too.
Understood. Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Jesse. So
Alright.
your next lab this week is going to be Physio X. And so Jesse's going to go ahead and go through that process with you.
Yes. So PhysioX is going to be a little bit different. Let me share my screen. Unlike the lab simulations where after you finish lab simulation, after you finish simulation, the grade will automatically be uploaded to the Canvas. So you'll be able to see your grade as soon as you finish the Labster. With Physio, after you log in or after you buy it, and you're going to go through the link on the Canvas shell, and you'll be able to get to this page where after you sign in, this is what you'll see. Is the main screen. You guys can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So after you get there, you're gonna go in, you're gonna see the exercises and activities. These might or may not be similar to what Dr. Honey has up, but for each activity or for each exercise that we give to you guys, you're just gonna go in to each of the activities, and just as I said before, it's not gonna be automatically given to us, your grade. So what you guys are gonna have to do is at the end of everything, you're gonna do the pre-lab quiz, do the experiment, post-lab quiz, and then you'll have your results. It's going to have everything that you did in this lab there. You're going to click the printable savable version. You're putting your name. For this purpose, I'll be me. And it'll give you everything. So obviously I didn't do it, but for you guys, it'll show all your results, your lab quiz results, your experiment, everything you did in your experiment. And you're gonna just print, save as. This is what we want for you guys to give to us in the lab itself. So you're gonna submit this. This is what we want from you guys. So you're gonna just change the destination to save as PDF. You're gonna save it and choose where you want to save it. Anywhere. I'm gonna have it just my desktop. I'll just save it there. And that's what we're gonna want from you guys to submit to us. It's just this. So you can upload that straight to your Canvas shell on the lab whenever we do physio or anything. It's gonna have your name on it. It's gonna have your session ID. The session ID is exclusive to you guys. So do not try to find another lab report or try to take a lab report for somebody else. Your ID is specific to your account. So we will know if you guys used it. Obviously, we can also just look at the results and see if they're pretty similar in that way. Other than that, that's all you'll submit. So it's pretty simple. You just grab the PDF when you're uploading it, upload that, submit, and we'll review it from there. And that's how you get your credit for physio. Any questions on physio? Excellent. Dr. Hen, you're making a face.
It was just responding to a message.
Okay. Well, good.
Okay, are there any questions? Any other questions? Nope. Okay, with that, I will let you guys get to your labster. Not lobster, labster, you know. But if you guys want to buy me lobster, I love lobster, it's delicious.
It is good.
And then I will see you guys on Wednesday. Okay, you guys have a good day.
Thank
Do you
you.
have one question I just remembered? In that lab kit that's being sent out,
Yep.
I forgot if you said, is there a little tank for the fish in there?
There is not a tank
There
for
is.
the fish.
Okay,
So
so I'll look
usually, yeah. Well, and you really don't, like, I provided you with a little cup, I mean, a little thing, and you can keep it there. It'll survive there unless it gets too fat. That means that you're overfeeding it, you know.
Yeah.
But if you want to give it a tank, feel free to get it a tank. You plan to
Okay.
keep it. And
Make it feel luxurious.
yes,
Very
yes,
good.
I went off. I thought I was going to get away with using a martini glass, a big martini glass, not a little one. It's a huge martini glass, and then I bought all your guys' fish, and I'm not kidding. It was less than a day. It was filled with poop from all the fish that were there. So it was just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yikes.
Okay.
So, any other questions?
About how long will it take for the lab kit to get mailed? you
I'm going to
think?
be mailing it out tomorrow. So if you put your address on the Canvas shell, then
Yeah.
I'll be able to sit there and mail it out to you tomorrow. Tomorrow
Okay.
morning is when I'm mailing everything out. So
So then we wouldn't, I know you said you were holding off on any sort of like labs with the fish until everybody has their lab stuff. So
That's
it'd
right.
probably
So-
be like a week.
yeah, it'll
Yeah.
probably be the end of next week. So most likely you're gonna have another simulation on Monday, and then Wednesday is when we probably will do our first one.
Okay, cool.
Well, you guys won't do it with the fish. We'll be doing it with membranes.
Sweet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll see you guys later. Take care.